Tonight, you're stepping into a story that isn't just about survival. It's about fear in its purest form. A single event, 6 perspectives, 6 people who all find themselves trapped inside the same shopping mall when the unthinkable happens. A group of armed men, masked and methodical, enter the building. They are not here to steal. They are not here to make demands. They are here to take control, to turn the mall into a prison, to turn its shoppers into hostages, and to turn the night into a nightmare that none of them saw coming. Each perspective tells the same story, but from different eyes, different fears, different choices. A cashier, just starting her shift, suddenly finds herself staring down the barrel of a gun. A janitor, used to cleaning up after the day's rush, is forced to hide in the shadows as he watches innocent people die. A cafeteria worker, trapped in a kitchen filled with knives but unable to fight back. A store manager who must choose between saving herself or protecting her staff. A visitor who walked in expecting a quick errand but found himself fighting for his life. And a delivery driver who should have driven away but instead stepped into the fire. For them, there is no escape. There is only one rule. Do as you're told, and maybe you'll survive. But in a situation like this, survival isn't a guarantee. And sometimes the only way out is through the nightmare itself. The rhythmic beeping of the scanner was hypnotic, a constant pulse in the heart of the store. Customers passed through my lane like waves, mothers with restless children, teenagers balancing armfuls of clothes, an elderly man fumbling with his change. I smiled, exchanged pleasantries, bagged their purchases. Routine, predictable, safe. Then the first gunshot shattered everything. The sound was sharp, metallic, deafening. A single echoing crack that cut through the mundane noise of commerce like a scalpel through flesh. For half a second, the world held its breath. The customers in my line froze, heads snapping up like startled deer. A woman let out a soft, confused gasp, as if her brain refused to register what her ears had heard. Then came the second shot. Louder, closer. Screams erupted like a tidal wave, crashing through the store. Shoppers dropped their bags and ran in all directions. A mother pulled her child to the floor, shielding him with her body. Security guards fumbled for their radios, their training unraveling before my eyes. My fingers trembled as I ducked behind the counter, heart hammering so hard I thought it would shatter my ribs. What was happening? A robbery, a lone gunman, a gang fight. My thoughts raced through possibilities, none of them comforting. Then I saw him, standing at the top of the escalator, silhouetted against the bright fluorescent lights. A man in black, tactical gear, a rifle slung across his chest, and he wasn't alone. 3 others flanked him, sweeping their weapons in wide arcs, their faces hidden beneath dark scarves. Not a robbery, not a fight. Something worse, something planned, a hostage situation. The realization slammed into me like a punch to the gut. They weren't shooting wildly. They were controlling, hurting, isolating. I pressed myself against the cold tile, breath coming in short, shallow bursts. Stay hidden, stay quiet. But my register was still open, the drawer full of cash gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head, strode toward my counter, gun raised. He had seen me. I squeezed my eyes shut as his footsteps drew closer, the scent of gunpowder and sweat thick in the air. I was going to die. The mop sloshed through the sudsy water, swirling dirt into a murky whirlpool. I had been working the night shift at the mall for years, cleaning up spilled soda, scrubbing away gum, sweeping up the remnants of busy shoppers who never noticed the man pushing a cart behind them. Tonight was just another shift, until the gunfire started. The first shots echoed through the vast hallways, rattling off the tile walls like firecrackers in an alley. I froze mid-swipe, my pulse stuttering. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a movie playing in the electronics store. Maybe it was a prank. Then came the screaming. Real, panicked, pure terror. I dropped the mop, the wooden handle clattering against the floor, and peered around the nearest pillar. Shoppers were running, no, stampeding, toward the exits, faces twisted in horror. Behind them, men in black advanced with practiced precision, their weapons raised. I saw the first casualty before I even understood what was happening. A woman in a floral dress, sprinting toward the exit, dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. Her legs buckled, her body collapsing onto the polished tiles. A dark stain spread beneath her, pooling like spilled ink. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. This was real. This was happening. The radios crackled on the belts of the security guards, but their voices were drowned out by the deafening shouts of the gunmen. Nobody moves! Down on the ground! People obeyed, not because they wanted to, but because there was no choice. I ducked behind a service door, chest heaving. Think. My janitor's closet was just a few feet away. If I could make it inside, I could barricade the door. I took one step, then a hand clamped around my wrist. I turned, expecting another terrified shopper. But it was one of them, a masked figure, eyes hard and unyielding. His grip was like iron, and his gun was pressed against my ribs. You move, you die. The mop sloshed through the sudsy water, swirling dirt into a murky whirlpool. I had been working the night shift at the mall for years, cleaning up spilled soda, scrubbing away gum, sweeping up the remnants of busy shoppers who never noticed the man pushing a cart behind them. Tonight was just another shift, until the gunfire started. The first shots echoed through the vast hallways, rattling off the tile walls like firecrackers in an alley. I froze mid-swipe, my pulse stuttering. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a movie playing in the electronics store. Maybe it was a prank. Then came the screaming. Real, panicked, pure terror. I dropped the mop, the wooden handle clattering against the floor, and peered around the nearest pillar. Shoppers were running, no, stampeding, toward the exits, faces twisted in horror. Behind them, men in black advanced with practiced precision, their weapons raised. I saw the first casualty before I even understood what was happening. A woman in a floral dress, sprinting toward the exit, dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. Her legs buckled, her body collapsing onto the polished tiles. A dark stain spread beneath her, pooling like spilled ink. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. This was real. This was happening. The radios crackled on the belts of the security guards, but their voices were drowned out by the deafening shouts of the gunmen. Nobody moves! Down on the ground! People obeyed, not because they wanted to, but because there was no choice. I ducked behind a service door, chest heaving. Think. My janitor's closet was just a few feet away. If I could make it inside, I could barricade the door. I took one step, then a hand clamped around my wrist. I turned, expecting another terrified shopper. But it was one of them, a masked figure, eyes hard and unyielding. His grip was like iron, and his gun was pressed against my ribs. You move, you die. The deep fryer hissed, the scent of sizzling oil filling the air. Customers leaned against the counter, waiting for their orders. A group of teenagers scrolled through their phones, oblivious to the world. A mother balanced a toddler on her hip while counting change. Ordinary, mundane, safe. Then, without warning, the world exploded. The first burst of gunfire was distant, like a car backfiring. But the second came closer, shattering the illusion of normalcy. I I saw the shock hit the faces of my customers as they turned toward the noise. Then, screams, people running. The food trays clattered to the floor, fries scattering like debris from a wreckage. Through the glass panels of the food court, I saw them. The gunmen, armed, organized, efficient. The mother with the toddler tried to run. She didn't make it. The bullet caught her in the back. She crumpled, her child tumbling from her arms, wailing. I couldn't move. My hands gripped the counter, knuckles white. Do something, hide, run, fight, anything. Then the doors burst open, and they were inside. Everyone down! I dropped behind the fryer, hot oil splattering against my sleeve. The tiled floor beneath me was slick with grease and smelled like burnt chicken. My breathing was too loud. Would they hear me? I didn't want to die in a kitchen. And then, footsteps. One of them was coming, searching, hunting. The barrel of his gun appeared first, peeking around the counter. Then the boots, then the voice. Come out, or I start shooting through the counter. My body locked in place. They had won. Everything had a protocol. Emergencies had flowcharts, procedures, backup plans. Corporate made sure of that. If there was a fire, an electrical outage, or even a robbery, I knew exactly what to do. But this? There was no protocol for this. I was standing near the entrance of my store, watching the mall's central atrium like I always did, when the first gunshot cracked through the air. The sound wasn't immediately recognizable. Maybe a dropped piece of equipment, a slammed door. But then came the second shot, and the screaming. My assistant manager, Claire, stood beside me, clipboard in hand, frozen in place. Customers inside the store turned, confused. Security guards outside our shop stiffened, reaching for their radios. Then I saw them, the men in black, the rifles, the masks. They moved with precision, no hesitation, no wild shots. They weren't amateurs. I grabbed Claire's wrist, yanking her behind a clothing rack. Don't move. My voice was barely above a whisper. Across the atrium, people were scattering like panicked insects. Some sprinted toward the exits, but the glass doors were already being sealed shut. Trapped. The gunmen moved quickly, cutting off escape routes. They weren't just shooting, they were hurting. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a mass shooting. This was something worse, a hostage situation. Then, over the store intercom, hijacked by one of the men, came the voice. Everyone on the ground, now. I wanted to run, but I had employees, customers, a store full of people who needed someone to tell them what to do. And that someone was me. I pushed Claire toward the stockroom. Take whoever you can. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone unless you hear my voice. She hesitated. What about you? I'll buy you time. The words left my mouth before I even thought about them. They sounded brave, heroic. I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was signing my own death sentence. Because one of them, the tallest gunman, the leader, had turned, and he was looking right at me. It was supposed to be a quick visit, in and out, no more than 10 minutes. I had planned to grab a birthday card for my sister, maybe a coffee if the line wasn't too long, and then head straight back to my car. That was the only reason I was at the mall that evening, nothing more. Just another errand to check off the list, another forgettable trip into the sea of escalators, food courts, and window displays. But 10 minutes stretched into 15 when I saw the bookstore. I couldn't resist. A quick detour, I told myself, just to browse. The air inside the store was warm, scented with the familiar blend of freshly printed pages and coffee brewing in the small cafe at the back. The quiet murmur of customers flipping through novels and whispering about bestsellers surrounded me as I trailed my fingers along the spines of books, letting titles catch my eye. That was when I heard the first noise. At first, it was faint, almost indistinct from the background hum of the mall's vast interior. Just a distant pop, as if something heavy had fallen from a shelf. I barely registered it, assuming someone had dropped a display or that a maintenance worker had knocked over a ladder. But then came the second sound, louder, sharper, closer. This time I felt it in my chest, a concussive crack that echoed through the open corridors of the mall. That wasn't something falling. That wasn't an accident. That was a gunshot. A chill crawled down my spine, my fingers tightening around the book I had absent-mindedly picked up. Number. That can't be right. That doesn't happen here. Then the screaming began. A woman's shriek cut through the air, high-pitched, raw with terror. Then another, and another. Then the sound of stamping feet, the chaotic, panicked rush of bodies moving all at once. The aisles of books around me trembled as a stampede of shoppers bolted past the storefront. I turned just in time to see a mother clutching her child to her chest, her face twisted in blind panic as she ran. The entire mall was moving, and then I saw them. 4 figures, all dressed in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by scarves and masks, standing at the upper-level balcony. Their posture was deliberate, their movements calculated. They were armed, and they weren't shooting at random. They were hurting. They were in control. My breath caught in my throat, my heartbeat hammering so violently that I could hear it in my ears. My legs screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. Then one of them fired. A man in a suit, just an average shopper like me, was sprinting toward the escalators when his body suddenly jerked backward, his chest exploding in a mist of red. His legs gave out beneath him, sending him crashing onto the tiled floor. I let out a strangled gasp, stumbling backward, my hands shaking so hard I dropped the book I had been holding. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was a hostage situation, and I was in the middle of it. "Everyone on the ground," the voice boomed over the mall's PA system, deep and commanding, sending a fresh wave of terror through the shoppers. People began dropping where they stood, hands covering their heads, eyes wide with unfiltered horror. I hesitated, just for a second. Then a bullet ripped through the air above me, embedding itself into the wall. The sharp impact sent fragments of drywall spraying onto the bookstore floor, and suddenly my legs obeyed before my mind did. I hit the ground, my hands pressing into the cold tile as my breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. The bookstore manager, a middle-aged man with graying hair and reading glasses still perched on the tip of his nose, lay beside me, his entire body trembling. He turned his head slightly, whispering, "Don't move." I wanted to reply. I wanted to ask him what was happening, what we should do, how we were supposed to survive this. But I knew the answer. There was nothing we could do. We were at their mercy. I could still hear people crying, their sobs muffled by hands pressed over mouths. A woman just a few feet away was whispering prayers under her breath, her voice shaking with every syllable. Then, through the gaps in the bookshelves, I saw one of the gunmen walking past. His boots made no rush, no urgency. He was calm, in control. As he moved, he passed a man in his 30s, lying on the floor nearby. The man had made no sudden movements, had obeyed the orders like the rest of us. But the gunman stopped. I felt my pulse stop with him. There was a long silence. Then, without warning, the gunman pulled the trigger. The man's head snapped backward, a single bullet punching through his skull. His body slumped, motionless. A cold wave of horror washed over me. There was no reason for that. No defiance, no attempted escape. The execution was random, a warning, and the warning was clear. None of us were safe. My vision blurred with panic. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to quiet my breathing, trying to make myself as small as possible, as invisible as I could be. Then I heard footsteps, coming closer. My entire body went rigid. Then, they stopped, right beside me. I turned my head just enough to see a pair of black boots, inches from my face. One of the gunmen was standing over me, watching, deciding. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. A moment passed, a long, agonizing moment. Then the boots turned away, and the gunman walked past. I felt my entire soul collapse with relief, but I knew the truth. We weren't hostages, we were prey, and the hunt had only just begun. I had been halfway through my last delivery of the night when my phone vibrated against my thigh. The buzzing startled me, dragging me out of my tired, automatic rhythm. I reached into my pocket, expecting a routine message from the warehouse, a delay, a change in drop-off location, maybe a complaint about damaged goods. But when I pulled out my phone and glanced at the screen, my stomach dropped. From warehouse supervisor, "Don't come in, something's wrong, call police." My heartbeat slowed for a moment, then sped up, hammering against my ribs. Something's wrong. What the hell did that mean? I was already in the loading dock, my truck idling, waiting for the metal security doors to roll up and let me inside. The mall's exterior was quiet, the huge concrete walls dull and lifeless in the dim glow of the overhead lights. A normal night, a routine drop-off. But something inside was wrong. I put the truck in park, hesitating before turning the key in the ignition. The moment the engine cut off, the silence settled over me like a weighted blanket. That was when I heard it. Gunfire, muffled but sharp. Explosive bursts of sound echoing from deep inside the mall. Not fireworks, not construction, something else, something violent. I sucked in a breath, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel as my mind struggled to catch up. Maybe it was a robbery gone bad. Maybe security had fired a warning shot. Maybe a second round of gunfire. Closer this time. A scream followed. Sharp, terrified. A full-body chill crawled up my spine. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911, my pulse drumming in my ears as I lifted the phone to the side of my face. It rang once, twice, then a voice. 911, what's your emergency? I licked my lips, my throat suddenly dry. I'm at the Westwood Mall, at the loading dock. I swallowed hard. There's gunfire inside. I think it's an attack. The operator's voice sharpened. How many shooters? I don't know. I just got here. My eyes darted toward the metal loading doors. They were cracked open just a few inches. Just enough to see inside. Just enough to see the horror. Bodies, lined up, face down, motionless. At first, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. The dim light inside the storage area cast long, unnatural shadows over the scene, making the bodies seem like discarded mannequins. But they weren't mannequins. They were employees, customers, people, and they weren't moving. My entire body locked up, a primal kind of terror rooting me to the spot. I wanted to turn away, to slam my truck into reverse and get the hell out of here. Then I saw her. A girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She was hiding beneath a shelving unit near the storage area, her tiny frame curled into a tight ball, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her breathing was ragged, sharp with fear. And she was staring right at me, her wide eyes locked onto mine, pleading without words. Help me. My mind screamed at me to leave, to turn around, to drive away and let the police handle it, to survive. But my feet were already moving. I slipped under the metal door, my breath shallow, my hands trembling as I moved toward her as quietly as possible. The storage room smelled of cold metal, sweat, and something else, something coppery, something wrong. the scent of spilled blood. I crouched low, my pulse roaring in my ears. I held up a single finger to my lips. Shh. The little girl didn't make a sound. She nodded, barely breathing. Behind us, footsteps echoed. Heavy, measured, getting closer. A voice, cold and calm, broke through the silence. We missed one. The girl stiffened. So did I. I turned my head just enough to see the figure emerging from the shadows. One of them, a gunman. His rifle was already raised. His face, hidden behind a black mask, showed no hesitation. I had only seconds to decide what to do. The girl was frozen in place, too scared to move. If I ran, he would shoot. If I stayed still, he would shoot. A single choice, a single breath. I lunged. I grabbed the girl in one swift motion, pulling her against my chest as I threw my body sideways. The first bullet hit the metal shelf where we had been hiding. Sparks flew. The second bullet grazed my shoulder. Pain exploded across my skin, but I didn't stop moving. I ran. I burst through the nearest employee door, nearly losing my balance as I shoved my way into a hallway lined with emergency signs. The exits. Where were the exits? The girl clung to me, her small hands gripping the fabric of my jacket like a lifeline. Footsteps behind us. Fast, chasing, closing in. I reached a junction, left or right. I didn't have time to think. I turned left. Another shot rang out. The doorframe beside me splintered into pieces. Run. Keep running. Don't stop. My lungs burned. The world blurred. I could feel my shoulder bleeding, feel the girl shaking in my arms. And that was the nightmare inside the mall. A single night, 6 different lives. Each of them forced to make choices they never thought they'd have to make. Some survived, some didn't. But one thing is certain, no one walked away the same. If you made it this far, congratulations, you survived the story. But now, I have one question for you. What would you have done? Would you have fought back? Would you have hidden? Would you have risked everything to save someone else? Let me know in the comments, because I have a feeling everyone would handle this situation just a little bit differently. And if you enjoyed this experience, don't forget to hit that like button. It lets me know you want more stories like this. And hey, if you're brave enough, subscribe. Who knows? The next time we step into the darkness, you might not make it out. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. And remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't what's hiding in the shadows. It's what's standing right in front of you.